How we doing, folks? Well, it's that time of year when could be putting the bikes to bed, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of winterisation. So generally I always start with the fuel, and unfortunately if you're running the E10 or even E5, it's pretty cruel to leave the E10 fuel in the tanks over winter. Unfortunately the ethanol is hygroscopic, so it actually pulls moisture out the atmosphere, and obviously as the weather gets cooler, the dew point, or the separation of the water molecules out the atmosphere onto other surfaces and wherever, obviously becomes more apparent. So I just have a quarter BSP, straight slack off the two fuel connectors, whiz this on, open the taps, do one side then the other, and then generally if like me, I always have the reserve side on the left, so you can switch to reserve while you're riding. Lean the bike over as far as you can to the reserve side, so you spill off whatever fuel's left in the tank to the reserve side, then drain the last little bit out. Then I normally do myself, well, I've already done it this year, but I've got about 9 litres that I've already done. So I normally strip out the ethanol. It's really simple. I've got a 20 litre clear plastic fuel container, or plastic barrel, or whatever it was in. I can't remember what was in it. But I've normally, for about 10 litres, I normally put about half a litre of water in the bottom. And in Cornwall, tap water is very clean, so it's just tap water I use, even for the batteries, for the electrolyte. Then stick your 10 litres in, give it a really good shake up, vigorous shake, and then leave it for a day. And what happens is the water is settles to the bottom, but because the ethanol is attracted to the water, it attaches itself and it all settles at the bottom. Then you just siphon from the top the fuel off the top, and then just stick the fuel in the tank. So you're leaving ethanol free fuel in the tank. I mean, the other thing that people do is drain the tanks completely, but I'm always a bit worried about that. If it's like down here in Cornwall, the humidity's very, very high. Even in summer, obviously in winter 100% humidity, no worries, and you do get a lot of condensation, so you're going to get water in the tank and all. So if you leave fuel in it, at least the fumes of the fuel kind of like dissipate whatever the airspace is left in the tank, to stop any moisture forming on the inside of the tank. I'm okay with the B50 because it's an aluminium tank. Wish all the tanks were aluminium, but there we go. So that's the fuel, and the other school of thought is that you fill the fuel tanks right to the very top, so there is no airspace. But I don't think I'd be doing that, because I'd probably have to ride the bikes. It'd probably take about 2 years before I've burnt all the fuel off. So that's the way I do it. But yeah, the other school of thought is filled right to the top. The other thing you've got to be careful of is obviously the fuel doesn't last forever, and I think this ethanol E10 stuff doesn't last as long in the tank. Goes stale a lot quicker. But anyway, and the other is the like on the Mark II concentrics, you can actually remove the drain from the bottom of the tank and drain all the fuel out. So I do the same on both of these, so they're completely dry, because if you leave fuel in the bottom of the carburetors to evaporate away, it leaves like a varnish or a film behind, and eventually it starts to clog up the jet. So it's better if you can drain it. If there is no drain, like on the Daytona's got Mark 1 concentrics on it with no drains on the bottom, just fire the bike up and just let it tick over or run until you've drawn as much fuel out of the carbs as possible. So that would be the fuel bit done for me. Then the other bit to consider, especially if you're running a BSA or a BSA, is the oil tank on this bike is actually in the frame, but on the B25, which is an earlier model, the oil tank's obviously here. So what I generally do is, and I do this with all my stuff, because they've got gear pumps, even if it's a really good quality pump, if you leave it long enough standing, eventually the oil will bypass the gears inside the pump. Sometimes they leak up the top of the spindle on the oil pump, and even if that anti-siphon valve is working, it can still leak out the spindle at the top of the pump. So I generally fit an isolation valve on mine. I mean, on the B25s it's a 3/8 pipe, so that's a 10mm gas valve, and the hole through the ball in the centre is the same size as the hole in the centre of the pipe, so there's no flow restriction whatsoever. I mean, I don't like these spring-loaded valves that open on suction, so only when the pump is asking for oil it allows it to flow through. I mean, I'm just not a fan of that. But the dangerous thing with fitting an isolation valve is obviously if you forget to turn it on. So these are my little silly things I put on there, but just to remind me, you're not going to kickstart the bike lest you switch that on. So on the B50, you can just see it. This is only a 5/16, so that's an 8mm gas ball valve from Screwfix there. And also it's handy if you want to work on the bike. You can turn the valve off if you're taking any pipes off, you're not going to drain the oil out. And again, there's my don't forget to open the valve device. So, and also about the oil, if you were going to do an oil change in spring anyway, I'd change the oil before winter, so you're leaving the bike with clean fresh oil in there, ready for the start up in summer or in spring. So regarding this is a bit of an unknown quantity for me yet, this, but these have a piston pump in here, and there's a check valve on the inlet side which is sucked open when the spindle goes up, and then when the spindle comes down it opens another valve and pushes out. So effectively you've got two check valves on the way in from the oil tank through the pump. So it's not normal or very unusual for a piston type oil pump to bypass and get wet sumping. So I've got nothing on this, and I'm hoping, I mean, I've not had it long enough to find out, but we'll find out over winter, but I'm sure this isn't going to wet sump. So and I'm not putting this one to bed just yet because I'm still going to have a few more rides out on it. Okay, so what we're left with now, so that was the fuel, and then that was the oil. Then the other is the batteries. Well, I generally take the batteries off, and there's a few ways to do it. You can leave them on the bike, like if you buy one of these things. This is an Oxford optimizer, I think it's 800 milliamps, so 0.8 of an amp or whatever you want to call it. So you leave that permanently connected onto the battery, and they give you, like, you can either have plugged that in and put it on the crocodile clips if it was to be on the bench, or they give you the tails with the connections on, and you leave this bit physically bolted onto the battery, and you just have the little plug hanging down, and then you plug into it. I've actually got a job going on outside with that at the moment. It's nothing to do with the bikes, but so that's one way. But what I generally do is once a month just give the batteries a charge. So I do not just my own stuff. These are off boats and a few other bits and pieces marinised for winter that I've taken off. And once a month I just set my stall out and I'll just charge each battery for 3 or 4 hours and keep them topped up once a month. Well, I've only got 3 battery chargers anyway, or 4, so I couldn't charge them all up, but that's how I generally do mine. And 3 hours once a month just keeps them in good nick, but I certainly wouldn't leave them. So I've got various chargers. This thing I only use with a flat battery. I wouldn't put that on for keeping a battery topped up. It's a bit heavy duty, but 800 milliamps, and this one is quite a good one, whoever Hayes is. This thing you can do calcium batteries, AGM wet batteries, gel fill batteries. You can pick your amperage, so you just have it on 1 amp if you're going to leave it connected onto the bike for over winter, or you do what I do and you just take the battery off and just give it a charge for a couple of hours every month. The good thing about this one and this one is if there's a power cut, if you were leaving it on the bike, then when the power comes back on, whatever you've had this thing set to, it comes back exactly to that point. And obviously this thing just comes on anyway. But I've actually got this little smart charger, and I think this one's 4 amps, but it's got, you can cycle through different modes: motorbike, car, heavy duty, cold weather, whatever. But this is an intelligent charger, and what it does, it'll boost the battery a bit, then throttle it back, switch off for a bit. You know, it kind of like oscillates the battery, forces the battery to up and down a little bit. You know, just keeps things moving. But the problem with this, you can set it up, set it to whatever mode, and if you leave it and there's a power cut, when the power comes back on, the default is off, because you have to press and set it to something. So it's alright if you're using it, you know, for the day or whatever, you can monitor it. But if you knock the power off, or someone switches something off and it goes off and then it comes back on or switch back on, the default is off. So, you know, there's pluses and minuses. But the other thing I like, I'm not a fan of lead acid. I use these things now. These are these little Life PO4s. You know, they weigh absolutely nothing. There's nothing to spill out of them or anything. They're not cheap. I think they're about 35 quid. But this one now is coming into its 4th year. So 4 years. It's done 3 winters, and it's still just as good, you know, as the day that when I first bought it. And the other good thing I like about these is they have a very high float voltage. Like the float voltage on a standard lead acid gel filled battery, you've got 12 volts, so you've got 6 cells, and each cell is 2.2 volts. So you have the surface voltage or the float voltage or whatever of a battery with, let's say, 1250 or 1300 SG specific gravity of your 25% sulfuric acid, your 75% distilled water, will give you that 12.6 volts, you know, when it's been, you know, a good battery being left, charged and left. But these things, I'll just put the meters on to show you. Let's give us some DC. So, am I on the right setting there? I'm on millivolts, hold on. Just let me put you down a sec, because I've not got enough pairs of hands. my battery run out on my meter, maybe? Yeah, unfortunately I've run out of battery. Oh, the battery's not got enough in it to register anyway, but the float voltage on these is about 13.5 volts. So, you know, they're a lovely little battery, and that's probably the future. And you can use them on no problem on a motorbike. These are actually motorcycle start batteries, so they're even enough to crank as well. And as long as, when you fit them, obviously you're on classic British bikes here with RM21 charging systems, so you're not going to get any more than 10 amps no matter what goes on. But if you've got a good voltage regulator, you're not going to be above 14.5 volts. So you check it before you fitted one of these batteries, because they don't like going over 15 volts. But as I say, this one's 3 years old, and you know, it's still good. And I do actually have a lithium battery charger for the 12 volt lithium cells. So you know, this is what I use for tickling these up over the winter period. So that's how I look after the batteries, but it's a bit cruel to leave them on the bike. And the other thing to bear in mind is, if you do leave them connected up, if there is any type of parasitic drain on the bike, then obviously the battery's going to pull down anyway. And the other is, if your bike's in a damp shed or something, you know, and not a very nice environment. I mean, I'm very lucky here. I've got insulated walls, I've got foam underneath the sterling board on the walls, I've got a, you know, wooden floor, I've got sterling boards on the roof. It is a very well insulated, you know, workshop, garage, whatever you want to call it. But if you're in a shed, you know, the condensation over winter is incredible. And you know, you can get something called surface tracking as well. So if the tops of the batteries are a bit mucky, you know, even that can discharge. So, you know, I always like to disconnect and take off, but yeah, whatever. So what are we looking at now? We're looking, so we've done the fuel, we've done the oil, we've looked after the battery, and now it's just the general condition. You know, we're stopping the bike from rusting. So by the way, I'm going to go through some of this stuff that I use. I've got no affiliation with anything or anybody relating to any of this stuff. This is stuff that I use and I find it works really well. But clean the bike first, give it a good clean, leave it outside in the sunshine, let it dry before you do anything with it. So you've now got a nice clean bike. So I normally buy this stuff, and it's called ACF 50, and I think it's Canadian. It's really good. I can't remember how much it is. You can get it in aerosols, or you can buy it in these, it actually is Canadian because it's in fluid ounces, so 32 ounces. And you get a little squeegee bottle with it, which I don't use the squeegee bottle. I have a compressor and I just wind the pressure up to 100, stick this in, and I just use a spray gun, because obviously I'm doing more than one bike generally. But this thing, you can use it with this and just, you know, concentrate the areas like the wheel rims, the wheel centres, anywhere that you think's going to rust. And really good stuff. There is some other stuff, and this is also made by the same company, Corrosion Block, and aluminium container as well. Again, not cheap, but when I was in the marine engineering bit that I used to do a few years ago, we used to use this stuff So if you ever were pulling an engine apart in the bottom of a bilge somewhere and you had bare, exposed, lovely shiny metal, you know, we used to hit it with this stuff. And it says it kills corrosion. I'm not sure about killing corrosion, but it does leave a lovely film on there, which, you know, the water doesn't seem to get underneath. Things like WD-40, you know, what a great product. I'm not knocking it, but I wouldn't be spraying WD-40 on my bike. I mean, it actually evaporates eventually, doesn't it? And you're left with nothing, whereas this stuff leaves a film. This stuff is a similar, but it's a thicker stuff, and you know, maybe in areas, if you've got something half stripped and you're going to be leaving it for some time, like I put this on the lathe bed, it works well. Then at the end of the season, end of the winter, I use this stuff. Again, got no affiliation with anything, and this is there's a bit in there. I just stick it in there. It just emulsifies and breaks this stuff down. So outside, give it a spray with this stuff, leave it on for 5-10 minutes or whatever, get the hose pipe, wash it off, it emulsifies it. Then I generally use something like, well, I do use like a car shampoo type wash and wax thing on the bikes, because it does give a bit of protection as well. So that's how I look after the bikes over winter. But also the other thing that to consider is if you're leaving it somewhere, I mean, I'm okay, the garage is next to the house, you know, we can see it through the front window, and obviously if you've got a garage attached to the house or integral, you know, you're going to be safe. But if you've got a remote garage, you know, really, no matter what you do, you know, you can't stop them getting in and trying to pinch your bike. So my bikes are insured, whether it be, you know, winter, summer, whatever. I mean, maybe because of my age, being an old fart, I think I pay about £55 each, fully comp insurance for the bikes. And maybe Cornwall, maybe a low crime area, I don't know. Anyway, it's just worth having them insured. You know, if you can't afford to buy them again, if they get lost, insure them. That's my philosophy. So I've got an Oxford Bulldog, Abbas something and something else, and when you go to insure it, you know, they ask what security you've got on, whatever it is, whatever one's fitted to whichever one. On the drop down it'll be in there somewhere. I know it's a bit ridiculous this day and age, because all you need is a disc cutter, and you know, within 30 seconds or less the chains are off. You just cannot stop, you know, a metal cutting blade, and whether it's titanium or whatever material it is, they just slice straight through it like butter. So but if you've got it insured and you've stated that you use one, use it, because if it gets stolen and you've not put it on and they can't find the evidence of the cut, you know, the debris that's left behind, you know, there's a bloody good chance you're not going to get a payout, because they're pretty good at that, aren't the insurance companies? But the other is the security of the of where you keep them as well. I mean, this is a Euro lock here, and I have just changed this one. So these Euro locks, you know, you can get them in various qualities, and they've got a diamond or kite mark or whatever, and this one's a 3-star, so it's bump proof and it's snap proof. So even if somebody hammers a screwdriver in the end, you know, forcibly twists it and, you know, breaks all the little pegs inside, the lock actually snaps here, so the locking mechanism still stays locked. But if they break the window, if you've got this particular type with a thumb wheel on the back, they just reach in and they can undo it from the inside. So, and I've just swapped mine for this type, so mine's key on both sides. So even if you break the window, you can't undo the door, you can't unlock the door, you know, it's physically locked. And you know, you're gonna lift the bike out through the window? I don't think so. So that, you know, is pretty good way of doing it. But I wouldn't recommend it in a house. I mean, we've got in the house, you should really have that on the inside, because if you lock the front door at night and you know, you've got to deadlock it with a key on the inside, and you take the key out and there's a house fire, fills up with smoke, and you can't find the keys, it's not good. So I think, you know, having that on the inside of your front door in the house is a good thing. So also the windows, I mean, I've got the blind down on this one, but I've got these security whatever they are, plus it's got the locking wind, you know, handle on it. But anything that you can slow them down is a good thing, and you know, I think that is a good idea. So you've got a roller shutter door, whatever. I mean, this is an electric one, so what I do with this one, this is actually isolated in the house, so when I finish in here at the end of the day or whatever job I'm doing, I turn that off. So you can't power it, it's not powered from inside here. I mean, this works off a key fob, up and down or whatever, but once you turn it off, it's off. And the other thing, the electric ones, they generally have like a little handle that you wind. If you have a power cut, you can always open the door. Well, I've taken mine off for that very reason. And the other thing I have is an alarm. I mean, 75 quid or whatever.
System armed. System disarmed.
You can use an RDF tab or
system disarmed.
Key fob, or type the numbers in or whatever it is. But this thing's Wi-Fi, so even though it has a little power supply, there's a battery in here, but once the alarm goes off and it triggers off the wireless alarms, which are separately powered, you can't stop the alarm going off, it's away. So I've got magnetic reed switches on the doors, I've got the vibration tamper things on the windows, and I've got a couple of these things, you know, the IR sensors or whatever. So, you know, you just do the best you can, because you know, if somebody wants it, they're going to get it. But if you've done as much as you can do to stop them taking it, then you've done your very best. And if it's insured and you've taken the right precautions, you know, you're definitely going to get paid out. I mean, you know, I'd rather have the bike and it not be stolen. You know, that's it. So this is one of those, this is for a job I'm doing for somebody. So it's the same type of thing. I think it was about 80 quid or 90 quid or something. Get a couple of these, get a couple of the door switch things, get a couple of the key fob things, whatever, and you get your RDF tags, RFID tags for knocking it out, or you can use the number. But the other good thing about these is they take a SIM card, and you can have it set so you can turn it on and turn it off on the phone. But also, if you get an alarm, it sends you an SMS to your phone to say you've got, you know, the alarm's gone off or whatever. So, you know, you go as far as you can. Not the simplest thing to set up. I mean, the pretty good manual. It's a bit Chinglish maybe or whatever, I don't know. But plenty on Fleabay anyway. But well worth it to protect. I mean, what are you paying for something like this? 5 or 6 grand, or if it was a Bonnie, 10 grand or something, you know. So they're out there and they want it, so you've got to do your very best to try and stop them taking it. And you've also got to do your very best to make sure when spring comes, you're not washing a load of rust off your bike. It's still in pristine condition. So that was what I personally do with my stuff over the winter, and a bit of security. But you know, it's well worth doing, because these classic bikes, you know, there's obviously less and less of them around, so it's nice to keep them for future generations. I'd like to think, you know, in 50 years time somebody still might be riding round on this. But there we go. Anyway folks, we'll catch you on the next one.